Hey, what's up guys? My name is Cherno and welcome to episode 5 of the game programming series, season 2. So, we're back. Unfortunately, I didn't have time last week to make an episode, but we're hopefully back to more or less a weekly kind of schedule here. And last time, episode 4, we talked about really how the server would receive packets and this whole listening process and the whole processing kind of process. And I even gave some examples in terms of the RC database and how we would actually handle something like, a login request or something like that, right? So what we're going to do today is actually start setting up the client side, because whilst we have a lot of kind of server stuff going on here, I mean, we don't have like a lot or anything, but we do have like quite a decent kind of start foundation for our server. Unless we set up a client right now, there's no way to test any of this. I mean, I've told you guys that, we have this listen thing that will theoretically accept packets, and we have a method here called send, which will send packets. All of that stuff is all good, but we can't test it because we need, in order to test networking, you need to have two things, right? If you're all alone, then you can't really test out your multiplayer capabilities. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a friend for ourselves, known as the client, so that we can talk to the client and socialize and hopefully transmit data back and forth. So to do that, I mean, because we kind of have, in terms of our project setup, we have this Rain project, of course, which is our actual game. That's the one that we kind of care about. That's where the client is going to reside. The server, of course, is a standalone application that runs on an actual server, right? So it would run on a dedicated computer, or it doesn't have to run on a dedicated computer. I mean, obviously you could just run it on your same computer that you were playing the game from, and that's fine. But what I mean is it is actually like a standalone application that runs on its own, right? It's not part of the game or anything like that. However, the client, of course, needs to be part of the game because, like, the game is the client. So in this Rain kind of package, we have another package called net, which is kind of where I set everything up. And that's where we're going to kind of create a new class inside the net package. And I mean, I'll probably just end up calling this client. We called the server, so it kind of makes sense to call the client. I'm going to quickly look at server and see what we've got here, because, I mean, theoretically, we kind of will be taking a lot of what we have here and putting it into our client. I mean, not like in a huge kind of way where we kind of just change absolutely everything, as in, like, there will be changes that we need to implement, obviously. Like, for example, here we just started diagram socket with a port and everything. Oh, actually, one thing I should mention, and I did mention this last time, is that because this is UDP, there isn't like this initial kind of, connection being established, right? There's, like TCP has that whole three-way handshake kind of thing that I'm not going to talk about. UDP doesn't have anything like that because, again, going back to my incredibly awesome mail analogy, all that UDP is about, right, is it's like kind of, you have this mailbox set up and you kind of go there and you collect mail, or you put mail in there and then the postman comes and takes it, right? It's that kind of thing where it's just kind of, there's no guarantee of really anything. You just kind of, you have a drop-off location. It's almost like some like ultra kind of shady deal going on where you get told to drop off your thing or whatever it is at a particular location, and then someone might take it, someone might not take it, but you drop it off and you leave and that's it, and then you receive further instructions, right? It's kind of like that. Yeah, that brings back memories. Anyway, sorry, back to this. So basically, in order to set this up, I mean, all it's going to be really is, again, real simple, kind of the same thing as the server in terms of we establish a socket, which is like our mailbox, yeah. And then we, of course, can kind of send and receive packets. So let's do it. When we set up a client, we're going to set up a constructor, of course, which takes in a port. We'll assign a port to a field, just like we normally kind of do. What else do we have in our server? That's really all we did. And then we have this start thing, which kind of, did stuff. So this is where the differences are going to come, because we're actually going to write a function called connect, right? And not only are we going to write a function called connect, we're actually also going to write an address into our client here. Now, the reason I'm doing this is not keep in mind, because suddenly there is going to be like an official kind of connection thing that we run. No, the actual low-level kind of API, in terms of the parts of Java's API that we use for this, are indeed going to be identical to the server. It's just that we're kind of simulating like we're creating our own kind of connection situation, right? Because of course we do kind of theoretically from a high level, we do need to establish a connection. Even if the low level doesn't support that, we'll have to add on that functionality because, you know, from an abstract kind of high level point of view, we require it. Excuse me. So let's do that. The other thing I'll quickly do, by the way, because this is going to get a bit annoying, so we'll store the inet address. I believe the server wouldn't have had an address. No, it wouldn't have. And then when we did do send, we took in the inet address thing. So I guess we'll do that. And then that means that, of course, when we assign address, we'll have to do inet address dot get by name, right? And then the host, of course, is the address. Okay. This will kind of be, I might actually call this the server or the host or something, because this is kind of the host like address, right? And of course that will kind of throw an exception, so we'll handle that. And of course I'm not even sure if we maybe should do that here. It might be worth doing it when we actually decide to connect. Because of course that means that establishing a connection. Yeah, okay. We're actually going to move this down. So we will still store string as, we'll say IP address and port, okay? And then we'll just say this dot IP address, not that we need this in this case, but anyway, this dot IP address equals host and this dot port equals port. And then of course when we do here, that's where we'll actually attempt to establish that thing. So the reason I've done that is because I don't want the constructor of client to start throwing all these exceptions and everything, right? It shouldn't be doing that. Connect is when we actually do stuff. By constructing a client, all you are doing and all you should be doing is basically setting up your data, right? You're setting up your parameters, that's it. You're not actually doing anything like validating the IP address, which is what we're about to do here, right? So I kind of want to ensure that I'm maintaining some kind of level of order around here. So we'll say IP, okay, so we will need an actual inet address. I'll call it server address, probably. So server address equals, oh, what do we have there? Yep, server address equals inet address dot get by name, and then our host, of course, is this IP address. That's going to throw an exception, but no worries. We'll surround that with a try and catch and handle that. So, of course, I'm going to be really simple with this. I'm going to return a boolean. If there is a problem, we're going to basically return false. If you wanted to, you could maintain some kind of error code. I guess I should probably, because we're trying to be good programmers here. I mean, just to show you guys something that you could set up that's kind of really easy is we could have an enum called error or something, right? And then we're gonna have like, you know, none, and you could theoretically return this instead of a boolean, but I kind of like returning a boolean instead. It doesn't really matter. So we'll have none. We'll have like invalid host. We'll have, so invalid host, let's see. I'm trying to think of a good way to describe the lack of a connection. Invalid host. Okay, we'll come to it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Invalid connection seems like a weird term. I'll probably think of something as I continue. But basically, if this happens, of course, I don't know why I did that. I meant to do this, of course. We'll print stack trace kind of on debug builds, I guess. And then we'll also, what we'll do is we'll have a private error code or something, which will be equal to error.none by default, of course. And then I guess we'll set the error code, for example, here to invalid host. Okay. So this is one way of doing it. You could obviously also make it so that you return an error, and then you could check to see if error doesn't equal error. Like if error doesn't equal error.none, it means you've got an error. Okay, so that's another thing you could do. Up to you. I'm just showing you guys kind of different ways to think about this. Okay, so we've got the server address set up. We'll do the thing that we always do, which is set up the what's it called? Our datagram socket. So we have our socket. I keep commenting stuff. So we have our socket, of course, which will be a new datagram socket. Of course, we're going to set that up on our port. And this will throw its own kind of socket exception. So this again is maybe something you might want to handle. I don't know. I'll keep this simple for now. And man, I gotta stop doing that. How do I keep doing that? Control / it seems. So error equals socket exception. Return false. Error code. And of course we'll have something, by the way, that's obviously like get error code or something which returns that error code. Maybe also we have something that just automatically prints it as well or logs it to a file. Lots of things we could do, right? So assuming our socket is set up, we're basically ready to go. So we're going to move on to kind of sending stuff. So if we have a public void send, again, this is a different situation than the server. In the server, our send method required an address because we need to know where we're sending it to. This is the client. The only thing the client can connect to is the server, right? The client should only be sending data towards the server. Now you might have multiple servers. You might have multiple places that you theoretically want to send information. Like for example, maybe this is like a multiplayer game, obviously, and so you have your server where you send your like positional information and actual gameplay related stuff. But then you might also have like another server or another set of data that you want to send basically, which is telemetry data. So for example, metrics and like stuff like that, right? Just for like statistics purposes and just, you know, whatever. So telemetry, you might want to send obviously to one server, and then actual gameplay stuff you might want to send to another server. So yes, you could have multiple servers. That being said, we're going to assume for now that the server you're going to send to is just that one. Okay, that's the one that you specify when you make the client, and that's it. Maybe, of course, if you wanted to send to multiple servers, or you wanted to, you know, I guess connect to 2 different servers, again, one for maybe like for different purposes, you could just create two instances of this client class, and theoretically that should work. Okay, so now that's out of the way. Because of that, all you really do need to send is that byte data, right, that we have. Like this stuff is not required. So we have our data. To save a bit of time, I'm just going to grab this and copy it and paste it into here because it's going to be identical. The address, of course, is going to be the host address or the server address, I called it. And what's your deal? No, you're good now. Okay, there was a warning saying that it was unused, but of course it is used now. This is, yep, okay. So we have this, and then the port, of course, that we're going to send to will actually not be this. Oh, yeah, this is interesting. Sorry, this is where I need to actually mention something because I've done this wrong. This port is not the port of the client, right? This port is the server's port. And in fact, to clear that up, I'm actually going to create another constructor that will just be like string host, which won't contain a port. And what this will do is basically format will be something like 192.168.1.1 colon like 5000 or something, right? Where you basically have this colon here and you have the whole IP address here because that's kind of how you want to provide it. This will basically just be like your format where you have, and maybe I'll stick this like here or something just so that we know, there we go, that is for that. And then the format for this will be, might just write example instead. And then the format here will be basically, you know, that and that. So we've kind of separated it, right? And that's kind of how we're going to roll. So we'll shut that down for a bit. And so what we'll do here as a really simple thing, of course, and we can, you know, put invalid host if it fails maybe, is we're going to just basically grab the host. We're going to split it by a colon, right? Which will give us 2 values. Now, that will basically be, I don't know, parts. So we split that by that, of course. We can probably do some other kind of stuff to verify that it's correct. So for example, if parts.length doesn't equal 2, then we know there's an issue. So we can probably do 2 things. We can set the error code to invalid host. So we are doing some kind of validation here, by the way. It's just that we're not doing actual like validation in terms of that. We're just doing very basic string validation. And return. Okay, that's one verification we can run. Of course, the other one is going to be, we're going to set the IP address to parts 0. And then we're going to set the port to integer .parseInt parts1. Now, if this fails, which we're going to verify, so if that throws a number format exception, we're going to return, and we're going to set the error code again to invalid host. All right. So we should now have the port and the thing, the port and the IP address just from one string this time, so we don't have to provide that. And of course, we'll test that stuff. How are we going for time? 16-ish minutes. Okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. Excuse me. Okay, let's accelerate this a little bit. So, we have the socket, of course. So what I'll do now is, yes. So that's kind of where I left off. This port is the port of, this isn't correct. What we actually want to do is create a socket with just that, right? I mean, of course, we could specify some other port. It's definitely not going to be this port. I mean, it could be theoretically, but it doesn't, it could be like a random port. It doesn't matter, obviously, like within the correct range. So it could be like that or something, that's fine. But the point is, we don't care what port it is because this is the client, okay? We just need some kind of unused port so that we can essentially, again, we just want to set up a mailbox, and then that way we can send data to the server. Since no one's going to be connecting to us, right? Since no one is going to be sending us data before we send it to them, we don't need to basically publicly set our port or IP address for that matter, right? All you need to know is the IP address of the server. When the server receives your mail, right, there will be a return address on your letter, which means that the server will be like, oh, okay, I can see where this mail came from. I'll return it, you know, back, or I'll send my new letter back, right? So analogy aside, when the server receives a packet from the client, the packet will have the IP address and the port from which that packet came from. So then when the server wants to send the client a packet, the server can do so by sending it to basically to the address and port that it retrieved from the packet that it received from the client. Okay, it's kind of complicated, but it's really, really simple. Don't overthink it too much. So that being said, that's kind of how that works. So because of that, we can just say new datagram socket. That'll give us a random port because we don't really care. Okay, the only reason we need these two, well, the only reason we need the server address and the only reason we need the IP address and the port, which is in other words the server address, is because we actually want to, or the server address and the port, yeah, is because we actually want to connect to the server. Okay, that's it. So we haven't done any connecting yet. We've just created a mailbox or a socket. Ideally now what we want to do is actually try and send the data. So again, we try and send it to the server address and the port. If it doesn't work out, we won't really know, which is why we kind of need that acknowledgement. So what we'll do here is we will attempt to basically send a connection packet, okay? Which will be private void send connection packet. Now this is going to format some kind of packet. I'm going to be really simple with this. I'm just going to say we have our data, which is going to be as simple as, for now, maybe we'll send connection packet. Again, obviously that's a huge waste of like bandwidth and everything because it's huge. We could probably send something like some kind of code or something like really simple and probably not a string. But anyway, this will be as good as we really need to be for now. As in this is a good test. And of course, we'll send that data and it knows exactly where to send it to. Now, assuming we get that successfully, which we probably will, we should do two things. First of all, we definitely need to make sure that we're sending this on a different thread, but we'll talk about that next time. And then the other thing will be we need to obviously hopefully receive something, but we don't really care about that right now. And then we'll return true if that's successful. Again, we don't know if it's successful yet, but what we're going to do here is wait for server to reply, which again, we'll talk about next time. However, we've done all this work, so let's at least test it out. And the way we're going to test it out is by doing two things. First of all, back in my game, I believe I left a to-do saying connect to server here. So let's try that out. We'll say client. Again, we'll just do this all sandbox in here for now. Client equals new client. We'll try the normal way first. So I'll still do localhost. However, the port I believe was like 8192 because that is my favorite port of all time for some reason. Yep. So the port that the server is running on is 8192 by reading the rain server class. So we'll stick that in first. 8192. Okay, and then of course we'll do client.connect. Okay, so how are we going to know if this connects? Well, first of all, we're going to run this and we're going to see if we get any exceptions. Now we shouldn't get anything at all, but let's just see what happens. Okay, game runs normally, nothing complains. Fantastic. Now let's start the server. And specifically, I believe we might have... No, we didn't. Okay, so what we'll do now is in the process method, for now, here's what we're going to do. So we have the data. This is back in the server class, of course, right? Server class. We have our process datagram packet. We're going to ignore the rest of this stuff. So a good way to easily ignore it is just say if true return. If you just write return, Java will not let you compile that code for some reason. So you have to write if true return, and that's basically just the same as commenting out the rest of this code. It's just a bit easier. Because we don't actually want to process this yet. So we have the data. The other thing I'll get though is the address, which is going to be packet.get address. And then finally, the port. We also want to know the port of where it came from. Packet.get port. Okay, so that's what I meant by when you send a letter, you have your return address on it, right? Packets also have that. Packets have the actual data, which is the contents, and then they also have where they came from. That's very important because, of course, we did start our client on a random port. So even if we somehow know the IP address of the client, we don't know the port. Okay, there's no way to know. I mean, not that you would, in a real world scenario, you wouldn't know the IP address of your clients anyway, right? As in, like, before they connect, you have no idea who's going to connect, right? When they connect, you can see what IP address connected, thus you have their IP address and port so that you can send them back data. But obviously you're not going to know. Like in this case, we know that the IP address of the client is going to be localhost because I'm running it on the same thing. But of course, in a real world scenario, you wouldn't know. So it's obviously vital for the packets to contain that information and for us to have it. So what we'll do is easily, what we'll just, as a debugging thing, we'll kind of do a print packet thing, or I'll just do dump packet, okay? And what dump packet will do is it will basically take in, I mean, I guess we can just take in the packet. This is what we need from it though, okay? So I'll quickly copy that and write a method here, probably, I'll do it at the end. So we'll have like all our debug methods at the end. Private void dump packet, and we'll have, whoops, a datagram packet. That's a socket. Okay, these are all that's basically the information I want to dump. And then we'll basically just say, maybe something like packet, and then we'll have an IP address and a port. So the way we'll do this is I'll just do a little tab here so that it shifts it along and it looks nice. I might even, because I'm like being fancy, I might even do something like that at the beginning and at the end, because, you know, printing is fun. We'll do plus address dot get, is there a good kind of get host name? Get host address, this is the IP address in the string format. That's kind of what I want. Plus, and then we'll do the port, okay? So we have that set up. And then of course we might as well kind of print the data. An easy way to do this, probably, I mean, we know that we received a string, so we could easily just do something like, I'll do this. So contents, and I might do just an extra print line here. Okay. Eclipse just null pointer exceptioned itself. That's fun. Anyway, hopefully that wasn't like too bad. Then of course for the contents, for example, we can do, and maybe I might do even 2 tabs here. I'll just, for now, I'll grab that byte array and I'll convert it into a string, okay? And then hopefully like that will be kind of okay. I mean, in this case it will be, but of course in other cases when we send raw data, which will have like, you know, zeros in it, null termination characters, this is not a good way to print, you know, bytes of data. But in this case, it'll be fine. So we're dumping our packet and that is good. And then of course we will need this because we need to, like when we take in the process, we want to know which client it came from so that of course we can tell all the other clients connected, for example, which player has moved where. Okay, important stuff. Okay, on 26 minutes, wasn't it 16 minutes like a second ago? Oh my, making these videos between 10 to 20 minutes long is absolutely impossible. I should stop wasting time. Sorry. This is the worst. Okay, sorry. Anyway, back to this. Where were we? Yes, so receiving, okay, so hopefully now if we start the server, which I'm going to do by just being like, you know, debug as Java application, I guess, and hopefully that means the server started. We're not even printing anything, but hopefully the server is listening. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start the client and then hopefully the server should print that, you know, connection packet text that we sent. So, what am I looking for? Debug as Java application. And, okay, let's just close the client. Now in the debug tab, I want to switch over to the server, which is still running. And then hopefully, awesome. What you can see in the console for the server, as you can see, this is the server's console. It says packet from this IP address and this port. So that is the local host IP address, of course. That is a random port that it has assigned. And the contents of this packet are connection packet, which is exactly what we sent. Fantastic, okay? There we go. So you can see how that's working now. We're now sending information, and this will theoretically, as long as like it's allowed through firewall and everything, work all around the world, right? As in if I had another computer somewhere on my local network or on an external network and whatever, it would theoretically work as long as I started my server on that and the server was allowed through firewall and it was like the ports were forwarded correctly on your router and everything. Theoretically, if you did that and then you, from another computer somewhere in the world, tried to connect to that IP address and that port, then you would be able to send data to it. Okay, so that is now working. That is a good place to wrap up the episode. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button. Leave any questions you may have in the comment section below. I'll try and write them down and answer them in the next video, or just reply to them via YouTube. If you want to support the series and get the source code, all of the source code is available on this game programming repository, which is a private GitHub repository with every episode, as you can see, as like a separate commit, so you can see like exactly what has changed since the last episode and all that stuff. If you want access to this, all you have to do is support me on Patreon. If you pledge $5 or more per month, which is like, I mean, what? That's like a cup of coffee or two, right? I mean, not a big deal. If you pledge that, you receive all this code for the game programming series, so that you can make sure that you're writing the correct code. And of course, by doing so, not only do you receive the code, you also support me, meaning I can continue making these videos. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next week with another game programming episode. Goodbye. Vroom.